Yeah, good morning to everybody. Dear participants, dear colleagues and friends, I'd like to warmly welcome you to our Dare to Connect Scientific Conference, which is entitled Science in Support of Ecological Networks, Lessons Learned from the European Greenbelt. My name is Thomas Wrubka. I'm researcher and teacher at the University of Vienna, and I have the pleasure to guide us through this conference day. I'm really delighted by the fact that almost 100 participants have registered, and currently there are about 60 people online, and that you are showing interest in the activities and outcomes of current projects in the Danube region and Central Europe and beyond, dealing with connecting nature in the wider sense. We, from the organization team, that is Liana Geidezis, Melanie Kreutz, Martin Kuba from the BUND Greenbelt in Nuremberg, Stefan Fuchs and myself from the University of Vienna, Daniela Nitsch and Isabella Kremnitzer and colleagues from our technical support staff at the event management. We are very much looking forward to your active participation. And we are also convinced that your contributions will further improve what we have in mind, namely the implementation of our joint research efforts, enabling us to really achieve this very important goal in conservation planning, namely how to improve and sustain connectivity of ecological networks, for which the European Greenbelt is an outstanding example, of course. I am also very satisfied that we could bring together a representative selection of speakers and motivate them to share with us their findings and experiences. I know this is really a big effort to save the time for us, but it was very motivating for us that we did not receive any declining answers when we originally asked you for contributions several weeks ago. So let me therefore thank you all for your willingness to cooperate in such an inspiring manner. I'm sure that your input will become another important brickstone in building functional ecological networks across Central Europe, the entire Danube region and beyond. Due to well-known circumstances, we are meeting online. So this is, most of you are now familiar with the format of such conferences. So let's keep in mind to stay unmuted if you're not actively saying something, and we have a question and answer section in the chat function in which you can put questions during the presentations. Let me now continue with the program and introduce to you Mrs. Liana Geidezis. She will give a welcome address. Dr. Liana Geidezis is a biologist, and she is working for the Greenbelt since 1998. She is currently head of the department Greenbelt of the BUND, Friends of the Earth, Germany. And her department is responsible for the coordination of the BUND's projects and activities of the inner German Greenbelt. She's also regional coordinator for the Greenbelt Central Europe region and a board member of the EGP Association. And last but not least, the BUND Department Greenbelt is also the lead partner of the Dare to Connect project, in the frame of which we are conducting this conference. Yeah, Liane, the screen is yours, so to say.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for the nice introduction. Yes, well, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, my dear friends of the Greenbelt, it is really a great pleasure for me to welcome you today to the scientific conference which is taking place in the framework of our project DaRe to Connect, which is funded by the Interreg Danube Transnational program of the European Union. This conference was, of course, once planned as a face-to-face event, but in these special times, Thomas mentioned already, we are glad that nevertheless we can hold this event online. Yesterday, during our Pan-European Green Belt Reconnect Forum, we already talked about the challenges and future developments in and after this pandemic. And I know a lot of you joined our event yesterday already. First of all, let me now thank the University of Vienna, Thomas Wipker and his wonderful team as partner in the Interreg Project for the organization of this scientific conference. I'm very happy that probably a lot of known people are participating in the conference. I cannot see you at the moment, but I guess also a lot of new ones are participating. And I hope we can also inspire the new colleagues of the European Green Belt, this fascinating ecological corridor and memorial landscape through the whole of Europe, from the Barents to the Black and Adriatic Sea, in any case, a hotspot of biodiversity. And biodiversity makes people happy. So we make people happy by protecting the European Green Belt and its biodiversity. A European study found that a high level of biodiversity in the immediate vicinity is just as important for life happiness, for life satisfaction as income. This was determined on the basis of data from the 2012 European Quality of Life Survey of more than 26,000 people, adults, from 26 European countries. And according to the study, a diverse natural environment plays an important role in human well-being throughout Europe, even beyond its material benefits. So I think this is a very important message that we should always keep in mind and we should actively use for our daily work. One of the threats to the survival of many animal and plant species, as we know, is the destruction or fragmentation of their natural habitats. The preservation of landscape connections in which animals and plants can spread freely from one habitat to another is therefore an essential component of nature conservation strategies in Europe and of course worldwide. Therefore, a sound scientific understanding and good data on connectivity are an important basis for nature conservation measures. So I'm convinced that many aspects and results of this conference will help us to further secure and develop the European Green Belt as an ecological network. And finally, that this will also bring us closer to our goal of designating the European Green Belt as an UNESCO World Heritage Site in the categories of nature and also culture. A recognition that it deserves according to its sheer expanse and ecological and historical dimensions. So with this in mind, I hope this will give us full inspiration and support our motivation and action to close more gaps in the Green Belt and build a long-lasting green infrastructure in Europe. I wish us a successful and pleasant conference with really fruitful discussions, but of course also good results. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Liana, for this very motivating welcome address. We will do our best. Our next speaker is Martin Kuba. He will introduce to the DaRe to Connect project. Dr. Martin Kuba is a geographer working at the BUND Department Green Belt as well since 2018, and he is the project manager, so the most important person in the DaRe to Connect project. The screen is yours, Martin.
Thank you, Thomas. The most important person in the project. That's a high barrier for me. Well, at least I have the pleasure to introduce you shortly to the project DaRe to Connect, with the long title Supporting Danube Region's Ecological Connectivity by Linking Natura 2000 Areas Along the Green Belt. Yes, I joined the BUND department with the beginning of this project. And I'm going to give you an overview now on this, on our project. It's funded within the Interreg Danube Transnational program with an overall budget of slightly above 2 million euros. You can here see the numbers, which fund is contributing how much to our project. We started in June 2018 and have very good news since the last days. The project will end by the end of November 2021. We have received a prolongation of 6 months, mainly because of the situation at the moment. In the project, we are working with 11 partners from 8 countries, plus 14 associated strategic partners from 10 countries. As it has already been mentioned, we here at the BUND Department Greenbelt are the lead partner in this project, and we are working on the priority of environment and culture responsible Danube region under the specific objective to foster the restoration and management of ecological corridors. These are all our partners actively involved in the project. There are representatives of all of the partners available here in the auditorium. These partners are working together in 6 pilot regions. The northernmost is right here around the corner in the border triangle of Czech Republic, Austria, and Germany. And we're going down the European green belt in the Danube region to the Romanian and Serbian border to the Iron Gates National Park.
Excuse me, Martin. Could you share your screen, because we don't see any slides?
I'm sorry. Okay.
No, it's okay. Now it's perfect.
So for the record, these are the information on the project, the logos of the partners. And now we are here. You can see the distribution of the pilot regions. Within the pilot regions, people are working on slightly different topics, depending on the topic that is essential to them. So for example, in our pilot region 1, we are focusing on green land habitats, on species-rich open land habitats. And for example, in pilot region 6, the Danube River Oxbows, there is a focus on the restoration of wetlands. An overreaching part of the project is the work. Oh, sorry. The main objectives of the project in an overall perspective is we want to contribute to the implementation of the EU strategy for the Danube region, and this happens by the further development of the connectivity of protected areas along the green belt in the Danube region, which contributes a backbone of the EU green infrastructure. We, from the start, wanted and did this by the identification of ecological corridors between the existing Natura 2000 areas as well as other protected areas along the EGB in the Danube region, and maintain and enhance the ecosystems and their services that we find there. We also have a focus on improving the capacities and the level of transnational and transboundary cooperations between GOs, NGOs, and on a policy level. This is a yeah, also an overreaching aim of the work at the European Green Belt. And of course, we also want to support the aim of the European Green Belt Initiative to nominate the European Green Belt as a UNESCO World Heritage, as Liana already mentioned. I'm going to give you a very short glimpse on the technical issues that we dealt with in the project, because you will hear this in more detail in the presentations that come mainly in the morning. In 4 of the pilot regions, we had Sentinel patches, high-resolution pictures, where we created to develop the method for habitat classification. And this is the example of our pilot region 1, where we focused on grasslands, as I said, where we already find that we can use these results for detailed planning of implementation measures. In this case, we already had connections to other projects and see how valuable our results are for the implementation. You will hear about that more in the afternoon by Tobias Windmeiser. And in the whole perspective, looking at the whole European Green Belt in the Danube region and a little bit north and south of the Danube region, we also did analysis that will be presented later by Stefan Fuchs. We created calculated a connectivity functionality index, which serves as a tool for the analysis of potential multifunctional ecological corridors. We identified so-called areas of action, which have the aim to serve as a basis for targeted planning of implementation measures. So the money that goes into implementation projects, for example, can be really targeted and thus enhance connectivity in the European Green Belt. This is quite a length of the European Green Belt. I think all of you should know. If not, I will mention it. We have 12,500 kilometers of European Green Belt in whole, and more than 3,000 kilometers are in the Danube region. So more on this later on. You also can download the result documents on our project homepage, interreg-danube.eu/D2C. And some pictures for a stop. This is to show you the impact that we already had with the project. We, of course, did conduct a lot of excursions, making the public aware of the topic of the European Green Belt and ecological connectivity. We had a huge press tour in 2019, so before the pandemic, where we noticed once again that the topic of the European Green Belt and the topics we are working on in the project are highly recommended by a public. We had a lot of journalists and a lot of output there. Of course, now we all have switched to online meetings, yet we have some way to go in the upcoming month, where the focus is on further promoting and capitalizing our findings. We've already seen that our results are valuable for planning authorities and others, and we want to keep up with this, and we have to see how this works out with the pandemic situation, if we can do it in person again, or if we have to keep to online events. So I say thank you very much for your attention. Here you can see my contact details. I'm happy to answer every question that you have. And I also invite you to visit our project website, interreg-danube.eu/D2C. And you can also join our Facebook page, which you find the link, or you can see the web address on the bottom. So thank you very much for your attention, and I wish all of us a wonderful conference day. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Martin, for setting the scene of our conference by giving us the essentials of DaRe to Connect. And I have to say, when we were tasked to prepare this scientific conference that is embedded in this DaRe to Connect activities, we tried to pursue two main goals. Firstly, to highlight some methodological innovations, as well as the state of the art in assessing functionality of this structure that we see as a connected network, or we want to see as a connected habitat network. So this is more or less the technical side of it, which is fascinating enough for a researcher like me. But secondly, we wanted also to analyze the chances, but also the challenges by applying these high-level scientific results and findings in the local implementation procedures and projects along the green belt and beyond. So these two goals we wanted to pursue, and as a consequence, our program has therefore two parts, as you have already mentioned probably. In the morning section, we will have a suite of presentations from various projects focusing on methodological improvements and innovations. In a stepwise approach, we will get from the utilization of remote sensing products to connectivity analysis and multifunctionality assessment. And last but not least, before the lunch break, we will hear and see how linkages in landscapes can be extended to people, to us. Like Liana was saying, biodiversity and well-connected habitats are making us happy and helping us to overcome crises like this one we are living in now. So in the afternoon, we will therefore focus on the lessons learned when it comes to implementation by giving you the possibility to voice your experience in 3 breakout groups. But by now, we will continue with the first round of presentations, which are showcasing various methodological approaches. And the first two speakers are Martin Neuwirth and Gebhard Banko, who will talk about the Sentinel-2-based habitat classification. The Professor Martin Neuwirth is a colleague from the Department Remote Sensing in the Environment Agency Austria. And Gebhard Banko is the head of this department. Both are working at the interface between remote sensing and the user community, mainly the user community from nature conservation. And both are also from the DaRe to Connect project team. So Martin and Gebhard, the screen is yours.
Welcome everybody to this conference. I'm glad to have the chance to have a short talk here and I will present today some findings of the core work package 3, interconnected green belt, where one major task dealt with the use of satellite data to monitor habitat types. So the main objective of this work package was, on one hand, to develop monitoring methods for the assessment of Natura 2000 areas within 4 pilot regions by the use of remote sensing data from EU Sentinel satellites. A second objective was the identification of suitable ecological corridors for the improvement of connectivity in the protected areas and also between the protected areas. And another important objective was the analysis of suitable transnational ecological corridors covering the whole green belt, as indicated already by Martin before. So I will now focus in my talk on the first objective, which only covers the mentioned pilot regions. In fact, we did this monitoring in 4 pilot regions. Pilot region 1, as already mentioned, covers the Bavarian forest, the Austrian region Mühlviertel, and the Czech side mainly the National Park Šumava. The second pilot region, marked in black here, covers the National Park Őrseg in Hungary and the Nature Park Goričko in Slovenia. Pilot region 3, here shown in green, is located on the border between Serbia and Romania and then folds the Romanian National Park Iron Gates and the Serbian National Park Čadap. And the fourth pilot region is located at the Drava River in Podravina County in Croatia, highlighted here in blue, bright blue. I will now present the results for these 2, pilot region 1 and pilot region 4, in more detail. Before, I want to talk a bit about the input data and our general workflow we established within the project. So our main data source was Sentinel-2 level 2A multispectral data, covering the visible range and the near infrared and also the shortwave infrared. So in total, we used 10 spectral channels in 10 and 20 meter spatial resolution. We also derived some vegetation indices, biophysical variables, and we used for sure reference data with broader habitat types inspired by the UNIS classification system. So to shortly show the workflow in the first step, so we set up a virtual environment at the Earth Observation Data Center in collaboration also with the Main University. And we there also had access to the Vienna Scientific Cluster. We accessed all the Sentinel data through their archive, where they provide the level 1.0 raw data. We then ingested them in a system to be able to do the atmospheric correction and the cloud screening to remove wrong values in the data. From this corrected data, we then calculated the mentioned vegetation indices, which better describe the state of the vegetation on the image. And also these biophysical variables were derived with this system. We then, for the classification of the habitat types, selected the best images, let's say it like this, so images with low or no cloud cover. And then did the feature extraction based on the reference data sets to get training and validation data for our classification model. For the classification, we used the random forest classifier, which is widely used in remote sensing research, and the scikit-learn package in Python 3. Here also the credits go to the team of the University Vienna and Markus Pöchtrager, who cannot be here today, but developed the main parts of the Python code. The result of this classification was then a map with broader habitat types, which was then used in the next step for a morphological spatial pattern analysis and the connectivity analysis. So only shortly to talk about the random forest. As already mentioned, it's widely used in remote sensing research, and especially a very satisfactory method to classify multispectral images. In general, it's based on the concept of decision trees, and creates hundreds or thousands of them and counts the vote of the resulting class, and the majority vote then is the defined broader habitat type in our case for each pixel. Yeah, also to mention, we did a pixel-based approach here to classify the broader habitat types. Directly shifting to the results of pilot region 1, which here is presented within a map with 12 broader habitat types, and showing the main classes in dark green. You can see here the big Bavarian forest, and here in blue the Danube, and in the Austrian part the more agricultural regions. If we zoom in a bit and also compare it with Korean land cover, we can already see how much we can increase the detail only by the spatial resolution of the sensor. So this is one of the major potential of this data source, that we really can see in a higher spatial resolution land cover and land use. The accuracy assessment of the model shows that we can really good classify, for example, the 3 forest-related classes, and achieve here quite high class accuracies, whereas the specific, very high detailed level 3 habitat classes do not work out in the classification very well. Overall, we achieve a very good accuracy of nearly 90%. For the model parameters, we used 1,000 trees to do the model, and we had 623 input features. Compared to the ground truth, because many of our colleagues have been in the field and really monitored the habitats on the field, it also shows that we can classify habitat types, especially the level 1 and level 2 classes in the UNIS scheme. When it comes to level 3 classes, it's getting tricky, but still there is potential to derive accurate habitat maps with this data source. The second pilot area I want to present here is the Drava River in Virovitica Podravina. Here we had quite similar classes, not completely similar because of the reference data sources, but we can also see again this comparison with Korean, which is really impressive, and is one major finding here. For the accuracy assessment, we can also see here that, for example, we can very satisfactorily differentiate 2 constructed classes. For example, the high imperviousness, which is really located in city centers, compared to constructed classes with significant green spaces. Overall, we achieved an accuracy of 77%. And yeah. Now before I hand over to Gebhard, I would like to close my talk with 3 conclusive remarks. So the combination of this temporal, spectral, and spatial resolution of Sentinel-2 data is really unique and creates new possibilities for remote sensing of biodiversity. The development of land cover and land use monitoring systems always relies on high quality in situ data. And random forests are really capable to classify multi-temporal Sentinel-2 datasets and to monitor the Earth's surface also at scale. Thanks for your attention, and now I hand over to Gebhard.
So thank you, Martin, and I will try for the organizers to be in time. I know we started a bit late. My short presentation will be to accompany you through this dynamic development of services in the sense of COPERNICUS Land Monitoring Services. As Martin explained, in this project, we had to deal with the broader habitat type map that we created from scratch based on original Sentinel images. But there are several COPERNICUS services. Most of them you will already have heard of, like the Korean Land Cover Program. We are currently have an operational production of so-called high-resolution layers, having forests, grasslands, and so on, and also hotspot monitorings. But sorry, I think we have the wrong slide here. And the upcoming services are quite many. And I would like to pay your attention to especially the second generation Korean land cover, because I think for ecological analysis, especially the SILC Plus backbone, which will be the successor or predecessor of the Korean land cover program, is of major attraction for you. In total, there are currently more than 115 products, and I showed you this table. You can go in detail at the land.copernicus.eu homepage. And Martin, the next slide, please. Just to recap the high resolution layers, if you just look at the image now, there are maybe 60% white dotted areas, but the rest of the areas, we have already information on a European-wide scale in a 10 by 10 meter pixel scale. And this is nothing that we had like 5 or 10 years before. Martin, the next slide, please. And more we go into the question, not only the identification of habitats, but also identifying the conditions, the ecological status. And as you see, for example, for grasslands, we deal with the question, how intensively managed are our grasslands? And from remote sensing, we can receive some proxy indicators. We cannot measure how much manure or fertilizers are brought up, but we can measure some management interventions, like in the best case, for example, for grasslands, mowing events, which are again an indicator for the intensity. And this will be partly integrated in the new high resolution layer on phenological indicators. Next slide, please. The focus that I said, and I think it's really an interesting data set that it's coming up, is the SILC Plus backbone. It should be published by end of 2021. And it will be the first time that you really have on a large scale, European-wide scale, small areas. We are speaking of 0.5 hectare in a vector data set, because we often have the problem that the borderlines between, for example, two managed arable fields are not identifiable if you only classify it in a raster and pixel-based data set. And so we as ecologists are very interested in the edges between different management units. Next slide, please. The nomenclature is, of course, not very dense. It will reflect the major land cover issues. And here, because I was included in defining the specifications, we really try to strictly speak of land cover and not land use. That's why, for example, terms like grassland or arable land, we avoid it, and we were speaking of either you have a permanent herbaceous coverage or a periodically herbaceous coverage. So reflecting a bit what we have in mind with arable land, but the major ecological difference is that arable land is plowed once in a while, whereas the traditional grasslands are not plowed. And this is to give you a glimpse how it can look like. Then finally, and this is another product that the European Environment Agency is currently working on, is to integrate all this kind of data in a grid database. And in the grid database, you will have, using a database query, the possibility to reflect on the percentage values. As you see here, we will ingest this CLC backbone. Next slide, please. We will overlay all this data using a 100 meter grid, and then we have exactly information on attributes on this 100 by 100 meter grid that can be queried using traditional SQL query languages. Next slide, please. So for me, the future options is this development of the services is very dynamic currently, and by end of 2021, we will have the first new data set on whole of Europe coming from CLC plus backbone. We have a row of thematic data layers having phenological indicators. And I think in combination with what Martin showed, the additional analysis using these data centers, like in Austria, the Earth Observation Data Center, or on a European-wide scale, the data information and access systems, where we have 4 currently in Europe, will really enable us to further go into detail on this broader habitat differentiation and condition assessment. Thank you, and I think the last slide are our references, and then you have the contacts for your convenience. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Gebhard, for this very interesting insight into the also new developments on the field of remote sensing and related services. The next speaker is Florian Danzinger, who will present an approach of ecosystem service assessment. So we are now switching from land cover or broader habitat to the services provided by them to society. Florian Danzinger is my colleague at the University of Vienna, Division of Conservation Biology, Vegetation and Landscape Ecology. He has received his Master of Science in Biodiversity Management and Conservation. He's currently working on several research projects, and he's very often tasked in these projects to bring science to people due to his outstanding communication talent. Yeah, Florian, the screen is yours. Please, yeah, we are a little bit behind schedule. Hopefully you can.
I will hurry up.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Good morning, fellow colleagues. Welcome to my presentation on analysis of multifunctionality using an ecosystem service capacity matrix. In this talk, I would like to give you a short overview how we implemented the concept of ecosystem services, or rather landscape services, in the Interreg Dare to Connect project to support the tasks of functional connectivity assessment and planning using satellite data-based habitat maps, as Martin showed you just before. Before we actually get into the matter, let me shortly show you how the analysis of the provision of ecosystem services was embedded in the actual work plan of Dare to Connect. Work partner, as work package leader of work package 3, our research group focused on the combination of methods dealing on the one side with spatial as well as functional aspects of landscapes along the green belt in the Danube region. Provision of ecosystem services by these landscapes was an important aspect, since there was a strong focus also on issues like the enhancement of connectivity, the identification of suitable ecological corridors, and also the analysis of potential implementation measures, we had to find an easy to use and efficient approach for the ecosystem service assessment that is also easy to communicate with stakeholders and decision makers. We therefore came up with a solution for which that applies, mainly analyzing multifunctionality by using an ecosystem service capacity matrix. Capacity matrices are a widely used tool for assessing ecosystem services, and they are principally just a lookup table that connect land cover types or habitat types to ecosystem services or landscape services potentially provided. In there to connect, we used the geodata of broader habitat types based on the machine learning approach by processed Sentinel data that Martin and Gebhard just showed you. And coming back to our objective of applying an efficient and easy to use method, you can imagine by just thinking about how to measure some of these services like climate regulation, maybe in tons of sequestrated carbon per hectare per year of a patch of semi-natural grassland, or the aesthetic value of a lot of mixed woodland, that is anything but trivial. And of course, there are sophisticated studies on how to precisely measure type and quantity and unit of these different services. But as you might imagine, these assessments are not very suitable for entire landscapes or even the green belt or large sections of it. Due to the nature of scale and focus in Data Connect, we applied the concept of landscape services by DaRe, which considers a landscape to provide services through its multifunctionality and the processes that emerge from a set of unique ecosystems, taking also into account both the natural and human modified habitats, and also transformed landscapes. And this is also the case for large sections of the greenbelt. Therefore, the concept of landscape services differentiates between 5 main categories of services: regulation services, habitat services, provision services, information services, and carrier services, which only refer to these transformed landscapes. So what is landscape service capacity in this context? Landscape services are provided by landscape elements, which are the basic spatial entities of a landscape. And according to Burkhardt et al., the landscape service capacity is the potential maximum yield provided by such a service. With this in mind, I finally would like to show you the practical implementation of this concept in the process of working with capacity matrices. As mentioned before, a capacity matrix is basically a lookup table that connects land cover or habitat types, landscape services potentially provided, from 0, which indicates no capacity, to 5, implying very high capacity. In Data Connect, we used a multi-stage expert-based process to produce a capacity matrix for the green belt. Starting from a study by Storr et al., which already linked certain services to land cover types across Europe, we translated these values to our broader habitat types, as well as landscape services, to provide a baseline for these hundreds of cell values. And the results were sent out to the Data Connect partners for an individual assessment. We then calculated mean values for each of the capacity scores from these individual expert-based revisions, and put up the resulting matrix for a shared editing and discussion on an online platform. Based on the joint discussion, resulting matrix was finally revised, and the total function value was calculated, representing an indicator for multifunctionality. For easier handling, also the geodata had to be translated and standardized accordingly to enable the broad application needed to cover the various landscapes along the green belt. And, finally, to analyze functionality, we link the geodata of the green belt to the landscape services matrix using Korean land cover classes as reference. And where it was possible to map single landscape services, but also main categories, and the total function value, which is the total amount of capacities of all landscape services provided by certain land cover classes. As an example, here you can see the classification of broader habitat types in the project region Šumava. Martin showed you also this map before. On the regional scale, you can either show single services or, as you can see here, aggregated main categories of functions. And these could map and they really show a differentiated picture in the provision of these services in the area. And to display the whole spectrum of multifunctionality, we also map the total function value mentioned before, highlighting especially areas that provide numerous benefits for human well-being, the importance of natural and semi-natural habitats, providing the broadest range of services, stands out the most, as you can see here in the area of the Šumava National Park, in a very dark green versus the urbanized areas offering much less services also to humans. So not only biodiversity, our goal is to strengthen diversity and connectivity of landscapes, but also to offer a better provision of landscape services to people living in these areas. Method applied in DaRe to Connect also provides high scalability. So from the regional application, like in the pilot region Šumava I showed you just right now, to the transnational perspective, as you can see here on the green belt, but also down to the local scale. And as an example for the high scalability, here you can see an example section of a small town on the local scale, also located along the green belt, but from another project, namely MaGICLandscapes, which my colleague Christopher Maas will present to you in detail later. And I just want to highlight here the highly detailed view could serve to detect areas of interest for interventions and communicate the benefits of multifunctional landscapes. In summary, it can be said that ecosystem service or landscape service analysis that was presented here is very suitable to describe the functional quality of broader habitat types and landscapes, highlighting numerous benefits for human well-being. And the resulting maps show hotspots and cold spots in the provision of certain services, main categories, or even the whole spectrum of multifunctionality of a landscape, and therefore highlight areas for intervention, for action, for improvement. And as I hopefully was able to demonstrate, the approaches lit on very different scales and can be easily adapted on to regional characteristics, also involving stakeholders, for example. And finally, to give you a little foretaste of what my colleague Stefan Fuchs will present to you after the break, the results of the ecosystem service analysis can be combined with spatial analysis of pattern and distance as well, to identify on the one side existing valuable habitats, but also less natural habitats with a high potential as connecting habitats, which we are aiming here in this project. So I hope I could give you an insight to our approach in implementing methods of ecosystem services, or rather landscape services analysis in the DaRe to Connect project, and coming a little bit closer to achieving an interconnected green belt. Thank you very much for your attention. Please feel free to write your questions in the chat. And, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Florian. Time is flying, so I can really proceed to our next speaker, Kalev Sepp from Estonia, who will present another elaborated approach of ecosystem service assessment in grassland ecosystems. Professor Kalev Sepp is a landscape ecologist and holds a chair at the Estonian University of Life Sciences, one of the top 50 universities in the world in this field. Kalev has also been working for the IUCN as a counselor in the Commission of Environment, Economic and Social Policy. And he is a very busy person. He's involved in numerous research projects. In one of them, biodiversity-founded Project Salvis, we are also cooperating. So I'm really grateful that you can that you have taken you the time to share your results with us. So Kalev, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Thomas, for kind introduction. Then I think everybody else is very, very busy, even during the lockdown now. But I'm very pleased that you invited me to give an example of using ecosystem service concept in our live VivaGrass project. And I also very thankful to my co-author, Miguel Viloslada. Then a couple of words about this VivaGrass project, which was the live project between 3 Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Like every project, we had several objectives, and today I will just tell what we created in terms of integrated ecosystem-based planning tool, how to implement the concept ecosystem service in the special planning. But project dealt also with policy analysis, raise awareness between planners and local stakeholders. And if you would like to see the products about publications or presentations, then you can just visit the VivaGrass website. Then 2 actions what I will use in my presentation. First of all, grassland ecosystem service assessment, how we did and how we developed the tool for the special planning. Then this is just our project area. We had around 10 partners, and our study areas were at different levels. In Estonia, we had, at the beginning it was municipality, but later on we had administrative reform and all Saaremaa became a municipality, and we had 1 county. We also involved farmers in each country, and in Latvia and Lithuania there were also nature protected areas. Then altogether we had 9 demo areas. And the VivaGrass integrated planning tool tried to locate ecosystem services, and especially hotspots and ecosystem service bundles provided by grasslands. And the second purpose was to integrate the ecosystem service framework into the special planning process. And in the case of Estonia, we tried to use this concept for enhancing existing green network in the planning. Then we use this well-known DaRe approach. First, we defined what is the mapping unit. Then at the tier 1, we selected the ecosystem services, altogether 18. At tier 2, we did statistical analysis using the PCA, just to find out what are the cold and hotspots of ecosystem services. And we also developed the multi-criteria decision analysis method for 2 areas, for bioenergy and for green network. Then 3 Baltic countries, but each of them are using a little bit different classification systems for grasslands. In Estonia, we have very detailed classification for semi-natural habitats like alvars and wooded meadows. But in Latvia, they just call biologically valuable grasslands, and then it was quite difficult to find the common classification. But finally, we based on land quality, on slope, and management regime, we classified or used the classification of 30 grassland types, then arable land classes, and then abandoned classes, and we create this base map. And of course, in the case of diet approach, you can ask conceptual questions, you can ask strategic question for meadow management, and then we created different maps and tables at different diet level. The simplest one is Tier 1, just based on expert evaluation. We evaluated all those 30 classes, and we did in this way that at the beginning, individual experts scored ecosystem services, 7, 9 persons from each country. Then we had focus group discussions, and then finally we got those marks in the table. And altogether, sorry, it was 17 ecosystem services, 5 provisional services, 8 regulated services, and 4 cultural service group evaluated in the scale of 5. And we used very precise maps for analyzing them. And in the Tier 2, you can find synergies. We found synergies and trade-off between ecosystem services. That in some cases, if we are using management practices, we are increasing certain services, then also some other services will improve. And in some cases, if you will focus on one service, then we are losing others. Then we created just kind of maps. And we did principal component analysis, finding which services are bundled together, and we put on the map. And then we use so-called concept of hot and cold spots of ecosystem services. The hotspots are territories which are delivering a high number of ecosystem services at a very high level, and we should keep them. And we're talking just about grasslands, and ecosystem service cold spots are territories which are delivering large number of ecosystem services at a low level, and we should do something with those areas. Then I think it's still active. You can also have this linkage to our tool. I didn't test in the morning. It's still running or not, but at least we built up this tool with several layers and possibilities to analyze. And at the Tier number 3, we tried to use different scenarios for grassland management and looking what's happening with ecosystem services in the case of different scenarios. And we used the 3 scenarios for green network from the current situation till ecological management, and additional to green network, we also did scenario analysis for bioenergy. And in the case of Estonia, we have the green network is part of special planning process. Then we don't talk about designating green network areas, corridors, co-areas, but we can just talk about enhancing existing network. Then example from the green network decision-making system. Like I said, we used 3 different scenarios, and we have also guidelines for designating green network co-areas and corridors in Estonia, already implemented more than 20 years. And later we did the analysis about these results. And we are just offering one additional tool, which unfortunately just based on only grassland, because nowadays we just finished one project where we evaluated the ecosystem services of grasslands, arable lands, forest and wetlands, and then practically we can use the same methodology for all territory, not only looking at the grasslands. And this tool tried to incorporate grassland management into the special planning activities, and especially focusing on the grasslands role in the green network, finding out where are those hotspots and where are the cold spots. And like I said, we used 3 different scenarios. Then if you look at the Estonian green network, then I didn't say when I showed I showed those pilot areas that both municipalities, Saaremaa Island and Läänemaa, they are part of Estonian green belt. We also had the Interreg project a couple of years ago, and we look at all coast, northern coast of Estonia and out coast of island Hiiumaa and Saaremaa. In Estonia, green network is part of Act on Special Planning, that the Act says that at 3 levels we should designate the green network and set the necessary land use conditions at the national level. And actually, this is the map of compilation of ecological network of 15 counties. Then this is one example of one county. It's Tallinn is here. It's this part of Estonia. And at the county level and national level, it's more like conceptual approach where the core areas and corridors should be. And at municipal level, you already should have very precise borders that looking at the forest borders and so on. Then we started this in Estonia 1999, and currently it's, we have done 2 rounds of county planning already. The second one was a couple of years ago, and currently also at municipal level, special planning is going on. We had administrative reform 3 years ago. If we had before 250 around municipalities, then currently we have just 78. We merged together several small municipalities, and now we're doing new plans. And in the case of these scenarios, we use 3 scenarios. It's the bare minimum, just looking some aspects, and just looking at the habitat bundles. And you can see the existing green network, which is designated via special planning. And those red areas are areas which are valuable grasslands, which could be part of, they could be merged to the corridor or core areas. Then the second scenario was so-called medium ecological coherence approach. There are more grasslands what could be included if we will use right management practices. And the third scenario is high ecological coherence. We're looking also many regulative scenarios. Then we can say that we developed the tool for special planners to enhance existing green network system in Estonia, those corridors and core areas. And we tried to use the concept of ecosystem services, and it was the first attempt. When we started the project in 2015, then Estonia was practically in the last place of, if you look at the MAES parameter in Europe. And now, according to thanks to our VivaGrass project and thanks to the project which finished just two months ago, we are already number 3. Then we have been quite successful. And if you would like to read more precisely about the methodology about those ecosystem services, what was designated, then you can look at the one ecosystem article. We published 4 or 5 articles about VivaGrass project, but this was the article about the methodology. Then thank you very much indeed. I just managed with 15 minutes.
So thank you, Kalev, for this very inspiring talk and for this perfect example of how to combine science and also planning, spatial planning on the national and municipal level. Yeah, time flies, but I think it was worth to hear all the details. We have used up, we have consumed now the time which was foreseen for question and answers, and I see only one question in the question and answer section, which is about how to deal with the mosaics and intensive succession areas. I guess it was a question put to Gebhard and Martin. Maybe both can be prepared to answer this question in our second question and answer round. And now I want to simply proceed because we should not have too much delay in the program now. So if you don't mind, I want to move on to the next speaker, who is Stefan Fuchs from Vienna. He will, who will present the Connectivity Functionality Index. Stefan is also one of my colleagues at the University of Vienna. He has also, like Florian, received his master in conservation biology and biodiversity management here. He's also working in several research projects combining his really outstanding GIS skills with a good knowledge of field ecology. So Stefan, the screen is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Thomas, for the nice introduction. I'm very happy to present to you the results from another part of the work package 3 of the DaToConnect project, namely the analysis of the connectivity using the GUIDOS toolbox and the connectivity functionality index. I want to show you a little bit of the methodology and the results and the application, and I'm trying to take not too much time since we have a little bit of delay already. So to start with, if we're talking about ecological corridors, we're talking about the essential elements of a functioning ecological network. These elements enable the species to migrate, and thus exchange between populations. And in the end, by this, they maintain the biodiversity, the genetical, taxonomic, ecosystemic, and functional as well. Yeah, of course, they have an important role as a result of this in preservation of species and habitats. Yeah, we can differ between several kinds of corridors. They can range from stepping stones, which are lower connectivity in the landscape, but sometimes very useful, of course, as well, to the continuous corridors with very high connectivity. Also, there doesn't always has to be one way to connect the landscape, but multiple corridor options, which work the best. Yeah, in the project, we followed 2 approaches, the regional approach and the pilot regions. you were presented already. For this one, we used the broader habitat type classification results from the Sentinel analysis. Here we have the example of pilot region 1, which you're also already familiar with. In order to analyze the connectivity, we used GUIDOS Toolbox, which is a free software package by the Joint Research Center from the European Commission by Vogt and Ritters. The data input for this software package is a binary raster image. That means the foreground of this raster image are the broader habitat types or the broader habitat type of interest, and all the other broader habitat types are the background. We conducted two analyses with this tool. The first one is the morphological spatial pattern analysis, as already shortly mentioned. This is a generic and universal pattern analysis framework provided by a sequence of morphological operators. That means it segments the data input to identify and localize exclusive morphometric features. So we can describe the geometry, connectivity, and the spatial arrangement of these image components. To give you a better image of what that means, here is a little result. The foreground of the raster image gets classified, gets categorized in 7 MSPA classes. We have in green the large core areas, like larger forest patches, for example. We have the connecting elements between 2 core areas in red, the bridges. We have in yellow loops, which connect the same core area to itself. Within the matrix in gray, which is mostly very intensively used land, for example, we have islets of isolated patches that are very small, and also branches in orange, which are linear structures from one corridor, but don't connect to anything else, but still a very valuable landscape element to work with. So let's see that, that application in action using the pilot region 1 as example, as I said. So here you can see the results for all the broader habitat types of interest, all natural habitat types like woodlands, grasslands, and so on. And to have a better picture of this, we zoom a little bit in here between the Šumava National Park here and Natura 2000 areas at the March on the border of Czech and Austria over there. And as you can see here again, the broad habitat classification from the Sentinel data. And the next step would be the NSPA with all the broad habitat types. Here you can see the large core areas and many possible connections. And of course, it is much more useful if we choose several or single habitat types. For example, we can pick out here the dry and mesic grasslands to get a good view of where are the big areas of this habitat type and where are connections already or where are possible connections to be made, to have a good illustration of the patches and the connections, and also the fragmentation of the broader habitat types. So we can locate the network that already exists. The other analysis we did with the GUIDOS toolbox was the Euclidean distance that shows the influence zones inside and outside of objects of interest. So by this, it derives the pairwise proximity between neighboring objects, in our case, broader habitat type patches. So we can measure the degree of intactness and shape of the image components. The result looks like this. This distance ranges range from green colors, which is inside the borders of the broader habitat type object, to the pink ones outside of the object. And by doing so, we can see where are big and continuous patches of these broader habitat types and where's the lack of it. And also you can see the network in between, which is also very interesting if we pick out again single habitat types, like for example, broadleaf coniferous forests, or even more if we take the much less abundant grasslands in pilot region 1, on which the focus was laid also on the regional guiding principle developed for this region. So we can see here where are the hotspots and well-established networks of, in this case, grasslands, for example, which can be very small, but using the Euclidean distance, we can point out very clearly where these hotspots are and where the cold spots are, of course. And yeah, by this way, we can choose cost-efficient pathways by using the habitat proximity. Yeah, there it is. On the other hand, we followed a transnational approach. For this one, we needed, of course, a comprehensive Eurobird database, since the Sentinel data was limited to our 4 pilot regions. So yeah, due to the cost and time efforts, it wasn't possible to do it for the entire green belt, which would be an enormous amount of data. So our solution was the UNIS habitat classification, which already was mentioned before by Gebhard and Martin. This European Nature Information System contains the ecosystem types of Europe and has a rougher resolution compared to the Sentinel data, but on the other hand is a very comprehensive and on the transnational scale sufficient spatial resolution. The thematic resolution would be the UNIS level 1 and 2. And yeah, the next step was, of course, to adapt the data set to our broader habitat types. So we translated this in the manner we already did with the Sentinel data to get a continuous broader habitat type data set throughout the entire green belt. And with this, we could start to combine the results from the conducted connectivity and functionality analysis to receive the connectivity functionality index. And to do so, we had to create indices for each parameter. So we scaled the MSA component, MSPA components from 0 to 1, and did the same with the functionality result. So the total function value already mentioned from my colleague before. And then we merged these two indices and created the mean value of them and could use it as the connectivity functionality index. And this index is an indicator for the areas with high potential and multifunctional corridors between the protected areas. So it points out the elements which have, on one hand, a very high connecting value and also a high multifunctional importance. And here we can see the results. In order to make this map more clear, we can blend out the not so suitable areas and get these results with the good to very high areas for reconnecting the protected areas. And by this, we have a great tool for political recommendation and prioritization. So we can point out areas, we can point out where are the areas and which actions we need to take there. So we call these areas of action, and the designation was, and we designated 3 types of them. there was on one hand the safeguard areas and the restore areas. Also, we have, of course, maintain areas inside the protected areas, but since the task of the project is to connect protected areas with each other, so the space in between is the focus here. We won't follow that approach here in detail. So with these areas of actions, we can dedicate regions with a crucial role for the further development of connectivity. So these two categories summarize different measures that need to be taken. On one hand, to strengthen the network of protected areas along the Greenbelt, and also doing so by enhancing the ecological corridors along the European Greenbelt in the Danube region. So we have on one hand the safeguard areas, which are located outside of the large existing protected areas. They have a high potential as a multifunctional corridor, and the future measures that need to be taken should mainly focus on preserving these already existing structures and habitats to improve the ecological network. And probably they lead to new to the designation of new protected areas, but not necessarily, of course. And what also should be done there is to prevent any worsening of the situation, of course, so that these valuable habitats won't transform into intensively used land, for example, or hedgerows that get cut down and so on. Yeah, we should try in these safeguard areas to amplify and enhance these multifunctional corridors wherever possible. On the other hand, we have the restore areas. These areas are on one hand outside of the existing protected areas and have a low potential as multifunctional corridors. So the focus on future implementation of conservation measures should focus on the reinstallation of the functional elements and also of the restoration of the existing ones, which may have lost in value. And it goes without saying that we also have to consider the existing valuable landscape elements as well, of course. Yeah, so here we have a few examples here from the German and Czech border region. For example, in between the National Park Šumava and the Natura 2000 areas in the northwest, we see here an area for safeguarding, since we have a lot of multifunctional corridor, potential corridors in between. On the next example, we can see the border region of the Greenbelt at borders of Austria. Here, for example, at the Weinviertel, where viticulture is very intensively used, we can see the lack of these green elements here, and these are very good regions to use this restore approach and put and get in new structures to connect these very intensively used and with few structures landscapes. As a third example, I show you the green belt next to the Geidezis National Park, which is our pilot region 4. Here as well, you can see, for example, these areas in the northwest of the national park, which are also very intensively agriculturally used. And despite having also protected areas inside, there's of course a need to strengthen the network here and get local and see how these implementations, these nature conservation measures can be implemented. So to sum things up, I want to give a short overview of the strengths and weaknesses of this approach. The strengths are, of course, that we have a combination of the habitat quality and connectivity value. So we can identify these crucial corridor elements on a transnational scale to work with. And yeah, this legible tool is good for political recommendations and the prioritizations, using these areas of action to point out the areas where action need to be done. Also, the comprehensive data input and the analysis tools are freely available, so you can also use this approach on any other region you want. And yeah, the downsides of this approach are that it does not comprise of the costs of suitable actions, which need to be figured out specifically for each region or area. Also, it doesn't comprise of the willingness of the landowners and so on, of course, but yeah, that's something you need to figure out in each case separately. Yeah, the resolution, as I said, is way lower than the Sentinel data resolution with 100 meters pixel size. So it's not very usable for the very local scale, but on the other hand, you can use a local mapping and assessment if necessary for get a more detailed view on the local side. And in the case of the project at the pilot regions, we can provide the Sentinel-2 database maps for a more detailed view. Yeah, that's it from my side. I hope I wasn't too slow. And thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan, for almost keeping the time, and also for this very interesting talk, combining the GIS work with also the strategic implementation. Yeah, our next speaker is Mr. Christoph Litscher from Austria. He will give a talk about the Alpine-Carpathian River Corridor Project. Christoph is affiliated with the National Park Danube, Donauauen, currently working as a project manager there for the Alpine-Carpathian River Corridor Project. He has received his master degrees in ecology from University of Vienna, and formerly also worked for the WWF Austria as a freshwater officer. So he is really a conservationist for long years, for a long period now. So Christoph, I know you are starting with a little movie, but yeah, the screen is yours, and we are very curious to see the movie and your presentation.
Life is movement. Animals' freedom of movement is severely restricted by human encroachment into their natural habitat. Rivers are obstructed, they are straightened or dammed. This robs species such as the kingfisher, the dice snake, or the common nazefish of their habitat. This is why they've become scarce. We must preserve the last bits of intact nature to sustain the wildlife. The Alpine-Carpathian River Corridor is vital for this very reason. It restores the habitat for flora and fauna. It sustains diversity. The Alpine-Carpathian River Corridor creates a natural network in which every species has the necessary freedom of movement, even humans. Biodiversity is dependent on our concept of responsibility. Let us protect our near-natural rivers. Let us preserve the network of life.
Yeah, thank you for having me today. I like to present to you a bit of the Alpine-Carpathian River Corridor Project. We are also financed by the Interreg program, Slovakia, Austria. And I want to give you quick examples of the project. It's not feasible to do that in the time frame in detail. So let's get right through it. As you can see, we have a plethora of partners and supporting partners in this project from different levels. We have the ministries, municipalities, fishery associations, all of which are helping to make this project happening. Before I go into the project itself, just let me allow some words on the region where we're working. We're working in the Alpine-Carpathian Corridor, as the project name, of course, suggested. The Alpine-Carpathian Corridor is a traditional migration route between the Alps in the west and the Carpathians in the east. As you can see from the satellite image, unfortunately, this region is heavily affected by human activities, of course, namely agriculture is one of the major impact factors here, with two large cities, Vienna and Bratislava, who are growing also. So this is a region that, as we can see in many other regions in Europe, is heavily affected by humans, but we still have protected areas that are intact, semi-intact. And the speciality or the interesting part here is that rivers in this part are directly connecting these still intact habitats. Of course, we are in a border region. That means transnational cooperation is key to success. The corridor doesn't stop at the border, neither do the animals or plants. So this is, of course, also a necessity for us to work cross-border, and by working cross-border, having a holistic approach to green infrastructure through the implementation of green infrastructure in a bit of a broader sense. But let's get to the project. As I said, the rivers are one of the direct connections between those still intact habitats, between these protected areas, but that doesn't mean the rivers are in a good state. As you can see at the pictures, the rivers are straight and dammed. This has a long history, mainly from agricultural reasons. And this is something we wanted to address with the project. I would say we have three pillars that we built the project goals on. One is, of course, the transnational cooperation, as I already mentioned. This is not working without it, or this is a necessity for protected areas, for example, to coordinate their efforts in improving the ecological corridors in this region. The second pillars and the core of the project is the restoration and species conservation activities that we are implementing. And of course, we don't do that for ourselves and in our small bubble. We also want to go outside. We also want to present our results. We also want to present our activities and raise the awareness of ecological corridors in that region. For the transnational cooperation, one of the major points, I would say, is the generation of knowledge and the transfer of knowledge. So we are conducting a series of concepts and studies, of course, also gaining experience by implementing our restoration actions, our species conservation actions, and all of that information we are compiling in an action plan on the ecological network of the Alpine-Carpathian Corridor. This is still a work in progress at the moment. Our project is running till summer this year. also prolonged through the pandemic. But this is one of the main features on the transnational cooperation between the protected areas, between different stakeholders, is the common knowledge base, or the creation of a common knowledge base for further actions. Then we go to the second pillar. As I said, the core of the project is, of course, the restoration measures that we are directly implementing in the area. In total, we have 13 pilot restoration actions on 5 rivers, 5 important rivers, tributaries to the Danube and the Morava in the region. The implementation of these actions is varied. It depends really on the situation we are facing there. Sometimes it's important to focus on the morphology. Sometimes it's more important to focus on hydrology, or a combination of those factors. As of course we have a bit of a time constraint, I cannot go through all the actions. So let me just give you an example of the Schwächert, which is this river here. In this area, we're starting from the top of the Schwächert in the Biosphere Reserve Wienerwald. The Schwächert, as you can see in the top left corner, is connecting the Biosphere Reserve Wienerwald directly to the Danube Floodplains National Park. So we are now in the upper section of the river, and we found a situation like that. We have old pipes, still concrete structures in the brooks, tributaries to the Schwächert, and we have spruce forests. So this is something we wanted to address by maintenance of old pipes, by removing structures like concrete pipes, and by forest conversion measures to thin out the spruce forests into alder ash communities, which should, of course, in a timely manner, result in something like you see on the right side as an intact habitat for amphibians mostly, and important core area for the habitat corridors. Then moving further down, in the middle section of the Schwächert, here we can see how the river is actually looking like for most of the part, running through the middle section. It's straightened. It's a relic from the 50s mostly, where rivers were straightened, used for agriculture, diverted, and have hard embankment. So there is no dynamic anymore, no interaction with the surrounding country, with the surrounding landscape. And this, of course, is something we wanted to address as a priority. So here you can see we removed the embankment of the hard embankment of the river and introduced some structural elements to provide the river with a bit of an initial push to start, to restart, I have to say, a bit of more of a dynamic, a pendulum motion that should improve the situation there. Is another view from down. So this whole section is around half a kilometer long, and then we were quite lucky because like 6 months or even less after we implemented this, or we finished this restoration measure, there was a slight, very small flood, actually, 1 year flood, and you can also see the results already. You can see here it's already dissolving a bit the structures. The embankment reacted very, very good. The river is really developing a bit of a dynamic, and this was also how to say, gifted for the kingfisher. There is a kingfisher brood pair now living in our restoration already after 1 year. Usually that doesn't go that fast. Usually those measures take a longer time to have or show an effect, actually. So we were quite lucky in this respect, but it's a big improvement for the situation at this locality. And another very positive part is the local population is very, very happy with what we did there. People can go to the river again, enjoy the river, see what it's like to have a more natural dynamic, not a straight, how to say, straight tunnel of a river. So this is something that worked out quite well. And then we have yet another different situation moving further downstream. We see here on the left side the river Schwechat within the city of Schwechat. You can see at the upper picture, this is urban area. This is, it was or is, has been recently finished protection of against flood by flood protection dam. Of course, here we have limited possibilities of structural changes in the river. So here we had to decide on a different approach, making structural changes within the riverbed, within the existing riverbed, without removing the hard embankment, which is not possible, of course, due to flood protection, but giving us an example of how we can improve ecological situation in a riverbed that, or in an urban riverbed without without danger to the flood protection measures that were implemented before. Here again, this is a picture of quite recent after the finishing, so there is not much dynamic yet to be seen. Nevertheless, I think our structural improvements here provide small habitats, microhabitats to a lot of species, give also a bit of a structural variation to create those microhabitats, and really looking forward to see how that looks in 2 or 3 years. Yeah, this was the restoration part, so this is the river restoration part, and we also have a species conservation part where we set implementation, we set actions directly for indicator species. In our case, we have 4 indicator species within the project. The kingfisher is an overarching indicator species for the whole project area, for the whole Alpine-Carpathian corridor. Then we have the dice snake, the common nace, and the Ukrainian brook lamprey. Again, I just give you one example on the kingfisher, how we approached that. In the first step, we wanted to see, okay, where can we actually find kingfisher within the Alpine-Carpathian corridor along the rivers? How do the habitats look? And where would it be possible, or would it be best suited to set actions? So as a first measure, we produced a catalog of measures, which was conducted by BirdLife to see where we should set actions. And in a second step, we invited a school from the city of Schwechat to help us actually install 2 brood walls in those sections that we identified with the Schwechat. I was really fascinated, to be honest, how hardworking the kids were. This is conservation at the first step. This is really how conservation is done, basically on the ground. They were amazingly happy to help us. It was a fun day, and we installed 2 brood walls for the kingfisher, which are already now used already. Yeah, this is for the second pillar, and the third pillar of the project is, of course, information and public involvement. We have also the obligation to inform not just the public, but also politicians, municipalities, what we are doing and why we are doing that. We have a wide range of tools, or developed a wide range of tools from folders, websites. We had an exhibition touring through the municipalities. And of course, we had a lot of press events just to get the word going and give information to interested individuals or the public in general. And the second part of this information public involvement is, of course, the awareness raising also, which is a very, very important part to get people understand what the value of nature, of connectivity, of habitat corridors is, to get decision makers also stand behind the actions that we implemented, together with municipalities, of course, again, and various organizations. I think that was it from my side. Yes, I tried to be very fast and quick to give time for some questions if you have one. Thank you very much for having me again, and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Christoph. It was really a very convincing example for bridging or linking corridors with species and people. I guess the question should be put in the final question and answer section, not now, because we have to proceed to our next speaker, Christopher Mars, another Christopher by chance. He will talk about connectivity beyond remote sensing, how to link habitats, landscape, and people. And Christopher is a Central European project manager for MaGICLandscapes, another Interreg project affiliated with the Technische University of Dresden. He has received degrees in environmental management and planning, so degrees, not only one, from the University of Manchester. He previously worked as a senior environmental consultant in the UK, and is now for a couple of years working in the planning community in Central Europe. He was, for instance, consultant for the TU Vienna as well. So please, Christopher, the screen is yours.
Okay, can you see my screen? I think you can see my screen. Okay, thank you, Thomas, for that nice introduction. Yes, I'm in exile in Central Europe for the moment. So thank you, everyone, for those presentations beforehand. I find myself sandwiched between two great films, and hopefully I can maintain those standards. So as Thomas said, I'm the project manager for Interreg MaGICLandscapes Project, Interreg Central Europe. We started in 2017 and we finished at the end of last year. I'm just going to go through my presentation. Theoretically. So there we go. So I'm just going to basically just go through the structure of the project and the key outputs and the reasons behind those and the reasons behind the project as well. So just I'm going to give you a quick description about the project, and we'll go through the individual work packages and then some numbers at the end. So the project, the objectives, it was to broaden the use of green infrastructure as a planning tool, and rather than just a concept or a word or a buzzword. It was to raise the awareness of the multifunctionality of green infrastructure. We've had some great presentations this morning, and nearly all focused on the ecological functions of the landscape. And from my point of view, from my background, using the term green infrastructure helps to connect people and communities better to those services and those benefits that GI provides, more than just ecological services. So as Liana mentioned earlier about people appreciate those spaces, and actually they add to the quality of life more than or equally to income. So it's very important to get that message across to people, because then it becomes more attractive and you don't alienate people so much with a very scientific speech. We wanted to show that green infrastructure helps meet multiple planning objectives. So well-planned green infrastructure can deliver ecological networks, it can reduce flooding, it can improve air quality. It can improve people's access to green space and therefore health and well-being, as well as making areas more attractive and stopping flight from areas as well. And we wanted to give people and planning institutions, communities, NGOs, the tools to make those decisions for themselves. We would provide the information and approaches, and we want them to decide at the local basis what would fit for them, what are their needs. And again, to provide those policymakers, planning professionals, land managers, communities with all the information they need to make those decisions and plan those projects. So we were 10 partners from 5 countries in the Central European region. We had 9 case studies from the 9 other partners and 40 associated institutions spread across the 5 participating countries. So here's our list of our project partners. You can see it's quite a mix. VuCos, the top one in Czech Republic. We had a nature foundation here in Germany, 3 national parks, 2 in the Giant Mountains, the Polish and the Czech side. The Tietal National Park down in Austria, in Florian and Stefan were talking about it earlier. 2 Italian partners as well, the city of Turin and ENIA, which is a national organization in Italy, and ourselves as lead partner. You can see here that University of Vienna, Stefan, Thomas, and Florian, they were the work package 2 leader for this project. So you're going to see quite a lot of similarities within this presentation. So I won't go into any detail, as those 2 have provided more than enough explanation about their processes. So it's just nice, 9 rather nice pictures of the places that were our case study areas. As you can see, they're mostly rural areas, which is kind of fitting in with the European idea of green infrastructure rather than at the urban level. From a personal point of view, I think that it's all together, but within this project, it was very much at this sort of rural and peri-urban interface of the rural areas. So the first part of work package 1, this was really about raising the awareness of the project, and a lot went into this handbook. We did policy and strategy reviews for the 5 countries that were taking part. This is very important if you're selling the idea of green infrastructure to a policymaker or a councillor or the town mayor. You need to show that what you're doing has added benefit for them. It's not just, unfortunately, it's not just for the kingfishers, but we have to show public benefits as well, and how green infrastructure interventions can meet those multiple objectives of different sectors like health, flooding, these types of things. We use the benefits of green infrastructure as described by the European Commission. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. They're perfectly decent. And actually, I'll show you later on how we use those to help communities and decision makers create their strategies. We also, within this book, we defined the relationships to ecosystem and landscape services, which Florian was talking about earlier. And also within there, the initial part of the project was identifying those specific local needs in each of those 9 case study areas. So this involved a lot of consultation. The second part, this was led by the Leibniz Institute of here in Dresden, and this is a manual of transnational green infrastructure assessment. This identified how to map, describe and identify what green infrastructure is at the larger spatial scales. They identify types of data sets that you can use, what you can't use, which are appropriate scales to use, which aren't. They identify the limitations of some types of data, such as resolution. Within this, we create from this in each of the 9 case study areas, we created these larger broad scale maps of green infrastructure. And these are used as part of the strategy development. So this 3 levels of information and assessment. So this is the highest level. I'm going to introduce the second level in a moment, and the third level at the community and town level. So we use this, you can see here, I'm afraid it's in German because we did all our maps in German, but this is using the Carina information. And on here you can see that whereas the green belt, which has been the main focus of today's presentations, it's not really the only backbone within Europe. You can see chains of green infrastructure that also need linking to the green belts as well. And these maps were provided at this level, at Central European level. And then we also created them at the case study area. This case study looking at here is Dubner Heide, which is on the border between Saxony-Anhalt here in Germany. So this is a very interesting case study area because 2 different planning associations, 2 different types of mapping the natural habitats. Yeah, it was quite interesting. But this gave us the basis, the wider base on which the strategies and providing the information came. Secondly, and this is where Florian, Thomas, and Stefan worked very, very hard for the project, and this is the manual of functionality assessment. Those 2, Stefan and Florian, have described it very well, so I won't go into too much detail. But again, it was looking at the types of data that you need, where to get it from, what types, what scales. We also, within this, it is a manual. So everything that Florian and Stefan were talking about earlier, this tells you how to do it in your area, and it shows you how to do it at regional basis, at a super regional basis, and also at a local community level if necessary. In there, it tells you how to do the GUIDOS process, how to undertake field mapping, so you can ground truth those approaches. So I mean, you can't map everything from space. You do have to get your boots muddy sometimes and go and check things. And in there, it also tells you how to undertake a functionality analysis, and again, describing how you landscape services and how you map those. As Florian showed you, I've got an example coming up here. So there it is. Sorry, I forgot that. That's actually the manual there. And so here you can see an example from the Dubner Heide where we looked at the landscape services for regulation, and we mapped this. And then with this second layer of mapping from functionality, this enabled decision makers to go, okay, this is a bit more important here, this is not so important. Oh, here we actually need that we're missing some functions. So it gives them information which they can start to build decisions upon. We also carried out the GUIDOS mapping for each of the case study areas. So in all 9 areas, this whole process was undertaken in parallel. So we were learning things from each other as we were doing it, finding out what worked, what didn't work, particularly with things like definitions of green infrastructure or how far we should be making the buffer areas and these types of things. It was a real cooperative effort. So it worked very well. So each of this is with the sorry, phone. This took place in each of the case study areas. This is just a small segment of the Dubner Heide case study area. Work package 3. Now this is where it kind of brings all those together. This is sort of it's like a go-to manual for decision makers, planners, policy makers, people wishing to understand green infrastructure better, people trying to get an angle on it, and people wishing to write a strategy and produce an action plan. And within this manual, it introduces those previous tools that I've just talked about. So the transnational work and the policy reviews in work package 1. In work package 2, it explains the functionality analysis and it introduces the public benefit assessment within this. It also tells you how to write, or shows you how you can write a strategy and action plan using that information, as well as some other methods I'm about to describe. It's available in 5 languages, including English, so Czech, Polish, German, and Italian. And within it, It describes the 9 case study areas and how they use all these tools to develop their strategies and to write those action plans. So it gives you an example from which you can read it and go, okay, that's, oh, I see how they've done that. I like that, blah, blah, blah. I don't like this. Or I can see relationships between my area and what they've done. So it gives you 9 examples of 9 examples of how you could do it. And the contents are, so what is green infrastructure? Very important. Why do you need one? And it goes on to describe what the benefits are. It describes who should use a manual. Well, this is an NGO, planning authority, policymaker, a town mayor, a community group. How you should structure a strategy. What should you consider? What information do you need? So these 3 levels of assessment. Who should be involved in producing a strategy? How do you set objectives? And how do you write an action plan? So we used, so I just mentioned the public benefits. What we have here are the 13 benefits that the European Commission identified in 2013. And they're very useful because they are very easy to understand. And that isn't wanting me to sound condescending, but when we talk about landscape services and ecosystem services at stakeholder meetings, sometimes that can alienate people. And it's a lot easier for them to understand health and well-being, conservation, water management, education, tourism. These are much more relatable items. And using these 13 categories, it's easier to communicate with those people, but also get those people to think about how they would improve their area using those things, those benefits as points of interest. So using those benefits, we again built a capacity matrix similar to what Florian was talking about earlier, and you can see them running across the top of the screen there. That's each of those 13 benefits, and then we associated those with the CLC, the Korean land cover classes, in order to get a value. And then we use this for mapping. So in this one, again, sorry, it's in German, but it says tourism and recreation. And this is scored on a 0 to 3, so 4 levels. And this is very useful in helping these decision makers try and understand where they can improve green infrastructure to raise the level of benefit with regard to tourism. So, and this, with those benefits, we were able to use those within stakeholder engagement and meetings, and we say where are the strengths, the needs, the opportunities, the threats, based on those 13 categories. So we all use we all went through this process in all of these 9 case study areas, and we say, okay, where are the strengths of recreation in your area? Where are the weaknesses? Where are the threats? Where are the opportunities? And then we would combine this with those other maps, and then you can start to get a really good spatial picture of how where you can do it, where it's possible, and also where you have the public support to do those things. Okay. Using that information, each of the case study areas produce their own strategy maps that are standalone, and you can see an example here. Again, it's in German, very sorry about that. But they all identified their most important themes. Which out of those 13 benefits, which were the most important to their area? Obviously, biodiversity came top most of the time, but health and well-being and recreation was also highly scored, as well as water management. So each area was able to prioritize what they wanted to happen in their area. And they all produce maps such as this, and associated action plans. This particular one here had 8 action plans associated with it, which were costed out, who's going to be responsible for, and what actions were going to take place when. So there's a legacy to the project, which I'm very happy about. So I think I'm getting close to my 15 minutes now. So just in numbers, the project, in the end, we had over 50 institutions across the 9 case study areas adopting the strategies and action plans, and we had 104 letters of intent where people said they would use those findings as well. 40 institutions adopted the tools, so those 3 manuals, well, 4 manuals. We have 9 strategies and action plans across 9 different landscapes in Central Europe, where previously there was no real wide understanding or awareness of green infrastructure as a concept, certainly not as a multifunctional concept. Obviously, each country has its own brand of GI, whether that's an ecological network or the territorial system of ecological stability in Czech, these types of things. 354 people have been trained in the use of those tools across those institutions. So hopefully they'll be able to employ these techniques and yeah, just employ those techniques and widen the use of GI as a concept. And we've generated just around 7 million euros of projects planned arising from this project. So I'm going to finish there. I think that's probably my 15 minutes up. There's my email address. There's our website address. All of our tools are available on our website to download in the various languages. And thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Chris, also for keeping the time. I'm really grateful that you found the time to give this presentation. I'm also grateful that you are now finishing our joint project with all the bureaucratic hurdles that you have to take. So yeah, let me really thank you for this, because you have been a great project manager, and the numbers you finally presented were again very impressive to me as well.
Yeah, you're embarrassing me now.
No. Yeah, we should have now 15 times for another question and answer round, but we don't have. Some of the questions have been already answered. There were questions concerning the material provided in the projects, and Chris has already answered that all the material, handbooks and so on, is published and can be downloaded from the website in the 5 languages, and including English, I presume.
No.
Oh,
well,
sorry.
We didn't separate the German and Austrian languages. We kept them just as German. Okay.
Okay.
So they're available in German, Czech, Polish,
Italian. What a shame! I would have. Yeah.
And English. So we're just waiting to upload the last couple in Italian and German. And
the same is true for the presentations of today. We have recorded them, and they will be made available to all of you. All the speakers gave their consent to share the material. There were 2 questions rather from the technical side, and I guess they have been answered in the meantime, so you can look it up for yourself in the question and answer section. So please do so, because we don't have the time now for extended discussion. So again, thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
I will now move on to our final presentation, or screening of a very nice film. We will change the perspective now quite radically from natural science and planning to cultural sciences, and thus to the people, or let's say to the heart of people. And it's really a great pleasure to announce now the contribution of Mrs. Lenka Ovčáčková from Charles University in Prague. Her contribution is entitled "To be in Relationship with Nature." Dr. Lenka Ovčáčková spent her childhood and early youth in the White Carpathians, which is another border area between Moravia and Slovakia, so not exactly on the green belt, but not far from it. And there she developed a deep connection with nature, and leading her to study environment at the MaGICLandscapes University in Brno, and then doctoral studies in philosophy and history of science at the Charles University of Prague. So she could really deepen this bond with nature in her studies, I would say. And in 2006, she started to produce a series of documentary films inspired by a philosophical and also poetic, lyrical attitude to the holistic perception of nature. So I'm really grateful, Lenka, that you found also the time to present us one of your, or a short glimpse of one of your 9 bilingual films that you have produced so far. So Lenka, the screen is yours.
Was erzählt uns die Landschaft?
Was für mich im Naturschutz schon eine Rolle spielt, ist, dass wir ja ein Produkt dieser Welt sind und ein Teil dieser Welt und im Prinzip mit allem hier verwandt sind und alles rund um uns zum Leben brauchen, weil sonst hätten wir uns nicht so entwickelt. Wir haben uns ja an diese Umwelt angepasst und aus diesem Grund sind wir logischerweise mit allem vernetzt und können nicht gegen die Natur wirtschaften, weil wir die Natur viel eher brauchen als sie uns, weil wir sind nur eine Art.
Ich rede nicht gern von Naturschutz, weil ich der Ansicht bin, dass ich nie etwas entsprechend schützen kann, was ich nicht genug kenne. Ja. Und deswegen rede ich lieber davon, in Beziehung zu sein zur Natur. Ich bin lieber in Beziehung und da lernen wir uns immer besser kennen.
Pro mě je to velmi niterní záležitost, tento vztah, jako konkrétně s Podijím a s kanionem řeky DaRe. Těch, řekněme, 40 kilometrů mezi Vranovem a Znojmem. Když do toho prostoru vstoupím, tak cítím nějaké spojení. Nedokážu to jakoby jinak úplně popsat. No.
Auf welche Weise spricht diese Landschaft zu dir?
Man spürt diese Jahrhunderte, die diese Landschaft schon besiedelt worden ist. Man kann es nicht beschreiben, aber das hat was.
Hier auf der Drosendorf-Gereser Platte sind wir in einem Gebiet, wo es ist ein Übergangsgebiet. Klimatisch ist es nicht richtig Waldviertel, es ist aber auch nicht mehr Weinviertel. Und da ist Unruhe in der Landschaft. Und sonst ist einfach der Raum ein ganz speziell schöner Raum, weil in der Mitte diese Teichkette sanft durchfließt, du immer noch die Weiden und Elemente der feuchten Landschaft hast und nur rundherum die Häuser sind. Also wir haben die grüne Infrastruktur, das grüne Band mitten durch den Ort.
Wie würdest du die Landschaft beschreiben?
Klein strukturiert, wobei natürlich genug große Ackerflächen auch vorhanden sind, aber es ist so ein schöner Mix aus Wiesen, aus Stilllegungen, aus kultivierten Ackerflächen, aus Weingärten, aus kleinen Wäldchen, wobei ja der Waldanteil könnte natürlich höher sein, das stimmt schon.
Wir haben in der Region das große Glück, dass mit den Kommassierungen im Prinzip vorbei ist. Also alles, was man zerstören konnte, hat man zerstört in den 70ern und 80ern im Prinzip. Und seitdem hat sich die Landschaft an sich nicht mehr allzu stark gewandelt. Also die Restflächen, die noch vorhanden sind an naturnahen Lebensräumen, sind zum Glück großteils seitdem erhalten geblieben.
My tady stojíme na okrajovém svahu Českého masivu a ta krajina je daná nějakými přírodními prvky a nějakou historií toho lidského ovlivnění. Tady třeba v případě Havranického vřesoviště jsou to bývalé pastviny, protknuté ovocnými sady. My jsme právě na tom východním okraji Českého masivu a přede mnou je oblast ponticko-panonské bioty, flory a fauny a tady se to krásně míchá s tou středoevropskou lesní biotou, která je právě už směrem na Českomoravskou vrchovinu. Další faktor, který ještě vstupuje do hry, je to, že tady je migrační zóna, řekněme ze Středomoří a spousta takových teplomilných organismů, ať už rostlin nebo živočichů, zejména hmyzu, vyznívá směrem severovýchodním až na střední nebo do severní Moravu. Takže tímto je ta krajina velmi výjimečná a je tady obrovské bohatství druhů rostlin a živočichů.
Mein Vater hat damals schon im Jahr 2000 auf biologische Wirtschaftsweise umgestellt und ich habe das auch nie in Frage gestellt. Für mich war das eigentlich immer der einzige oder der richtige Weg. Mein Vater hat damals eher gegen den Trend schon sehr früh erkannt, dass er das anders machen möchte. Und damals war er sehr, sehr stark noch auf Ackerbau spezialisiert und der Weinbau war so nebenbei. Und mittlerweile ist halt das Hauptaugenmerk bei unserem Weinbau und die Ackerflächen oder die Ackerbewirtschaftung ist halt sehr extensiv. Man will so wirtschaften, dass es nachhaltig ist, dass man dem Kreislauf nicht mehr entnimmt, als was er verträgt, dass das Ökosystem halt aufrechterhalten bleibt. Ja. Und das geht ja gerade im Weingarten relativ einfach, weil man sehr, sehr wenig Biomasse entnimmt und man kann eben mit diesen Nützlingspflanzen, die wir verwenden, man kann mit Kompost gut nachhaltig wirtschaften. Wir wollen eben Erosionsschutz haben, wir wollen, dass der Oberboden, der humusreiche Oberboden nicht abgeschwemmt wird. Die Befahrbarkeit der Gasse ist sehr, sehr wichtig, die Durchwurzelung des Bodens, die Belüftung des Bodens, das sind ja alles Faktoren, weshalb wir dieses Begrünungsmanagement eigentlich auf uns nehmen.
Ich bewundere die Bauern und Bäuerinnen, die jetzt schauen, dass sie ihre Nischen entwickeln, dass sie dieses Land weiterhin sorgsam bewirtschaften können. Ja. Und ich hoffe sehr, dass auch die Konsumenten und Konsumentinnen das entdecken, ja, wie viel das bedeutet, wenn man sorgsam mit dem Boden umgeht. Unsere Böden im Waldviertel sind alle degradiert. Wir haben einen Dauerhumus abgebaut. Ich meine, es gibt sicherlich schöne Ausnahmen. Aber die Böden sind die Substanz, da ist am meisten Wasser gespeichert eigentlich. Ja, man braucht nicht die Flüsse oder die Bäche oder die Seen anschauen. Im Boden ist das Wasser. Ja. Und da muss man so sorgsam bewirtschaften, nicht nach einem Regen mit einem großen Traktor reinfahren. Also wenn du nur einmal hineinfährst, hast du Verdichtungen erreicht, dass du mit Begrünungen das 10, 15 Jahre lang brauchst, um das wieder aufzubrechen.
Před 20 lety tady prostě pěstovali kukuřici. Když se podíváš na letecké snímky, tak ty lány byly scelené. To vůbec prostě, ta krajina bylo, že jo, jako rozoráno všechno. Byly udělané takovéhle prostě násilí, meliorace a jiné věci. A teď se to jakoby dává zpátky. Ty lidi, co to tady jako fakt cítí, že je to potřeba vrátit zpátky, už nejen z důvodu, že nám tady voda nese něco a pak s tím máme problémy ve vsi, ale že to je náš dluh jako vůči té krajině, tak prostě tady dělají pozemkové úpravy, zatravňujou, vysazujou znova aleje, meze a to, co prostě tady jako ta krajina měla a žila s tím prostě tisíce let, nebo tak prostě teď se to tady děje zpátky, takže zrovna tady stojíme prostě na zatravněném. Pár let je to zpátky, co je to teprve zatravněné?
Tady Národní park končí intravilánem obce a tam, kde není ta zástavba, tak už na to bezprostředně navazují intenzivní plochy zemědělské výroby. To znamená, buď je tam nějaký vinohrad nebo orná půda. Takže tam ta hranice mezi zemědělskou krajinou a mezi tou krajinou, která je nějakým způsobem zvláště chráněná, v tomto případě Národním parkem, tak je velice výrazný.
Der Umgang mit der Landschaft für mich ja, ist ein sehr breiter Umgang, weil ich ja nicht nur meine persönliche Beziehung zur Landschaft lebt, sondern auch als Landschaftsplanerin, Landschaftsarchitektin immer wieder den beruflichen Blick habe. Und in meiner Arbeit bleibe ich eigentlich immer auf der Beziehungsebene. Und auf dieser Beziehungsebene kann man dann rationale Argumente und Beobachtungen teilen. Man kann ja miteinander etwas messen. Ja, man kann messen, wie heiß sind die Oberflächen, man kann messen, wie viel Regenwasser rennt weg, wie viel Regenwasser könnte ich zurückhalten, wenn ich wieder mehr Vegetation in der Landschaft habe. Derzeit ist noch so, dass die Leute noch nicht ganz verstehen, dass also es gibt mehr Gründüngung, Bodenbedeckung, grüne Infrastruktur wird zum Teil aber noch entfernt. Also Vegetation, statt dass man sie verstärkt.
Dernberg gibt es ein Projekt jetzt seit 2 Jahren, wo der Naturschutzbund Flächen angekauft hat. Und das wird jetzt seit 2 Jahren gemäht. Es ist ein Trockenrasenbiotop, eigentlich was ganz Spezielles, das halt leider Gottes nicht mehr so oft gibt. Man hat das so bis in die 60er Jahre rein als Weingärten teilweise genutzt, als Hutweiden, wo eben Schafe, Ziegen dort geweidet haben, beziehungsweise man hat das Gras einfach geschnitten und das Heu dann weiter verfüttert. Zahlt sich jetzt nicht mehr aus und es ist ganz ein spezielles und wertvolles Naturreservat daraus entstanden.
Když se zamyslíme nad tím, jak by nelesní biotopy měly vypadat a v jakém stavu by měly být fixovány, tak to není vůbec jednoduchá úvaha. Chceme uplatnit princip reprezentativnosti, aby některé výjimečné druhy, o kterých ovšem víme, protože dnes zdaleka o všech můžeme vědět, aby tady byly zachovány, aby se nekonkurovaly, nebo chceme, aby ten vývoj, ta sukcese pokračovala a tady by pokračovala tak, že ta krajina začne zarůstat, nejdřív tím šípkem, který je všude kolem, později by se tady uplatnily lesní dřeviny, nebo chceme preferovat třeba v tomto případě vřes, který tady ještě před pár sty let byl dominantním keříčkem na těch pastevních plochách, nebo co je vlastně cílem. Jo? A pokud ta plocha je dostatečně veliká, tak je ideální se zamyslet tak, aby tady zůstala ta příroda v celém svém bohatství. To znamená, všechny ty potenciální biotopy, které si tu můžeme představit a které jsou schopny tady existovat, tady byly zastoupeny v mozaice a ve všech sukcesních stádiích.
Když to srovnáš ten krajinný ráz v tom Rakousku a tady?
Tam se ty vlastnické poměry nezměnily. Tam zůstaly ty malý políčka, takže ta pestrost jakoby je vyšší. Je tam taková ta úcta, jo, protože jsou ty pozemky malé. U nás to je obrovské, že jo, ty lány. Takže tam je ta krajina jako určitě v tom Rakousku z tohohle pohledu v lepším stavu.
Das Weinviertel war einmal einer der wasserreichsten Gebiete überhaupt in Österreich. Kann man sich heute gar nicht mehr vorstellen. Wir sind ein Trockengebiet. Und dass man vielleicht der Natur wieder ein bisschen mehr Raum lässt. Einfach das wachsen lässt, entstehen lässt. Ja. Und ich glaube, da könnte man sich von gewissen Regionen in Tschechien schon ein Beispiel nehmen. Wo es wirklich noch natürlich ist und wo es auch noch Baumalleen gibt mit wirklich alte, 100 Jahre und ältere Bäume. Und das hat einfach was.
Wenn in einer Landschaft ein Baum weggeschnitten wird oder Bäume, dann hat die Landschaft ein Loch, das merkt man. Wenn Menschen aus einer Landschaft wegziehen, dann hat die Landschaft ein Loch und das merkt man. Also insofern ist die Landschaft ein lebendiges Wesen, mit dem wir auch in Kontakt sind.
Tady, v té krajině toho Bodí, kde to bylo na hranici vlastně těch dvou režimů, tak si toho všimneš, že tady byly nějaké jízvy, nebo jsou nějaké jízvy. Tady se těžko žilo, rodiny byly rozdělené, nedovedu si to vůbec jakoby představit. A to je ta smutnější poloha, kterou tady v té krajině jako zažívám, která mě neskutečně nabíjí, ale zároveň jako velmi, velmi tak tíží.
Wie ich hierher gezogen bin, ist der eiserne Vorhang gerade aufgegangen und das war ein Wahnsinn. Es war wie eine riesengroße Wunde. Das war wirklich wie eine Schneise, für mich, wie ich es empfunden habe. Aber diese Wunde, die ist nur lange nicht geheilt. Ja. Das braucht noch lange Zeit. Ja.
Tady máte krásný projekt v Čížově, který už od malička ty děti intenzivně konfrontuje s přírodou. Jak to vzniklo vůbec, ten nápad?
Založili jsme školku vlastní. Jedna z těch náplní nebo z těch myšlenek je být neustále v přírodě za každého počasí, pěstovat prostě v tom maličkém človíčkovi takovou už samozřejmost, že jsem součástí přírody, a že ji potřebuju a tak se k ní musím nějak jakoby chovat. A že se v krajině něco mění, děje a já prostě k tomu můžu přispět nebo to můžu třeba i křehkým krokem zničit.
Ich habe angefangen, mich mit Biologie zu beschäftigen, im Prinzip, als ich ein kleines Kind war. Meine Eltern haben das auch unterstützt und waren viel mit mir draußen. Also seit mittlerweile 6,5 Jahren mache ich Ornithologie sehr, sehr intensiv. Und es macht natürlich einerseits Spaß, wenn man mit spannenden, seltenen Arten arbeitet, wenn man Ausnahmegäste entdeckt. Gleichzeitig ist mir auch wichtig, dass quasi die Vogelvielfalt im Ganzen erhalten bleibt und dass ich mich auch jeden Tag am Chilpen des Haussperlings erfreuen kann, der vor meinem Fenster sitzt, oder dass der Girlitz bei uns am Nussbaum singt. Also das gehört für mich einfach dazu.
Eigentlich bin ich ja ein unverbesserlicher Optimist und ich glaube schon, dass der Mensch grundsätzlich die Natur unbedingt zum Leben braucht und dass man auch wieder die Erkenntnis kriegt, dass das sehr, sehr wichtig ist und dass man in die Richtung wieder geht. Ich glaube, es ist auch die Zeit da. Also Klimawandel ist natürlich in aller Munde. Man spürt es auch, die Sommer werden länger, werden heißer. Man spürt das wirklich, jeder Einzelne spürt das. Und gerade da ist sehr wichtig auch, dass man das aufnimmt, ja, und da wirklich umsetzt und bewusst umsetzt, jeder Einzelne. Man kann anfangen, in seinem Garten heimische Pflanzen zum Setzen, Bäume zum Setzen, Sträucher zum Setzen, so weiter, vielleicht ein bisschen den Garten verwildern lässt.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy that the technical problems were solved and that I have now the possibility to tell you a few words about the formation of the film and also about my philosophical and scientific approach. This Austrian Czech short film was made in a frame of the European Union Central Euro Project Magic Landscape as a part of a series of 5 documentaries. All the films were connected with specific regions in the Central Europe, explicitly in northern Italy, Piedmont, Moravia, in the Czech, Polish, German, and in the Czech Polish border region, and covered the topic of green infrastructure as perceived by local people committed to its protection. The 5th documentary, to be in the relationship with nature, concerns the Czech-Austrian border region along the river DaRe, called Podí in Czech, and Steyrtal in Austria, which is a part of the northeastern Waldviertel and of the northwestern Weinviertel. During the film shooting, I was focusing on the holistic perception of the nature and also about the multi-layer experience of people who are living in the nature and with the nature. This approach is inherent in all the interviews. There are people who are professionally working within the landscape and those have professional reflection of processes of persistent and change of nature. And there are people who do many activities for protecting the landscape voluntarily. With those activities and reflections, the responsibility for the development of landscape and nature in the future is very closely connected. In my opinion, deep personal engagement is very important because only people who are living in the nature and with their nature can take really deep and enriching and effective steps for the true development of nature and the landscape. You were able now to listen to interesting reflections about green infrastructure as such, learn to know examples about the care of exceptional habitats and the tendencies to perform sustainable organic farming in the vineyards in the Austrian Weinviertel, but also about the tensions and subsequent destructions in the landscapes, which were strongly linked to the Iron Curtain. In this context, is it a very important question if the mental scars in the landscape, which emerged in the communistic era due to hard border, are hidden or present until today. After the opening of the border in some parts, there is of course a wonderful wealth of nature preserved, but for the people, the scars are still present. And in this sense, it's very important not only to let the nature develop on a more or less a natural way, but also to point out that these places are very important witnesses for creating and preserving historical awarenesses. For example, with regards to incidents in the time of the Second World War and the forced displacement of the German-speaking population in the Czech border regions in the period 1945 and 46. The frame of the film was set by quotations from treatise Magia Naturalis, written by Prokop Diviš, which represent his specific ideas related to the philosophy of nature in the middle of 18th century. Diviš was a Premonstratensian parish priest and was living in Přímětice near the town Znojmo, which is today on the edge of the national park Podvodí Tajatal. He is also a very famous person in the history of science because he invented 1754 as the first person worldwide the lightning conductor. I decided to use the quotations of Prokop Diviš because of his very interesting theological, philosophical, and scientific approach, which was also related to an explanation of the genesis of the world. In his cosmological perception, fire was an essential part. He wrote, and you could read it also, when a being has got a body and organs within it, the fire of nature becomes a living soul, and the soul has life-giving effects. He combined two kinds of fire, the active electrical one, which is in the air and in the ether, and the passive elementary fire, which is connected with the earth and with water. The electrical fire is very important in the world, but can also be harmful. And this fire, Diviš tried to bind, which resulted in the construction of a lightning conductor. We do not have so much time to speak about or in details about this topic, but maybe it can be understood that both fires, the electrical and the elementary one, exist in nature and that we do not want to bind the latter, which is analogical, a symbol for the intensive and deep engagement in the protection of our cosmos, universe, of our nature, and of our landscape. In this sense, I thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah, dear Lenka, thank you very, very much for this commented film screening. I think it was really important not only to watch and hear this wonderful film and interviews and to feel what people are, how they are connected with the landscape. It was also, to me, inspiring and important to hear your ideas behind and the sources of information you are drawing from. I can really recommend everybody to visit Lenka's webpage or to get in touch with her to explore the possibilities of watching all her other documentary films. I like them very much, and I can really recommend to watch it. We all have time now when we are sitting in our home offices to do so. Yes, thank you, Lenka. And thank you to all the speakers for the vivid presentations, and also to the audience for putting some questions that have already been answered so far as I have seen here. We will now have 30 minutes of lunch break, so a short lunch break. We will meet again at 1300, so 1 o'clock, but please note that you have to use another link for joining the afternoon session of our conference. You have been sent, this second link was also sent to you, and please use this new link to join in the afternoon session. I also have to say that the films are available on the Magic Landscape website to view. So if you visit the Magic Landscape Project website that was mentioned by Chris Mars, you also have the links to Lenka's documentary films. So thank you all for listening. See you at 1300 for the afternoon session.